Kia koutou. E te toa ahau ki te mihi kia koutou katoa. Kia mātou webinar, kai mahi haerenga tohu. Nō reira, no mai, haere mai. Ko George Makapatama ahau, kai whakahaere tuarua o ConCOVE. As the Deputy Director at ConCOVE, it is my pleasure to welcome you all today to the Workforce Journey Indicators webinar. On behalf of our board, hopefully some of them are here, on behalf of our three advisory groups, Māori, Women and Pasifika, also our Director, Catherine Hall, and the whole of our team, ConCOVE. No mai, haere mai. It's wonderful to be here. Before I pass on the floor to Nina, it's probably good to just welcome everybody in again, particularly those who are new to our whānau and new to our whare. So welcome to each and every one of you, especially our first timers who's joining us on the webinar today. Nina, shall we kick into the presentation? Probably good to set up a bit of scene before I pass you over to Nina. So who are we? ConCOVE, we were established in 2020 under the reform of the vocational education, and it stands for Construction and Infrastructure Centre of Vocational Excellence. And our primary goal is to integrate insights from the construction and infrastructure industry, along with our research into vocational education, thus aiming to enhance overall outcomes for our sector. And at our very core, we prioritize the needs of employers and learners, thus functioning as a bridge between industry experts and educational empowerment, I think. And we are, as we often say, industry-led and education-enabled. So, as you can see on the screen, the key drivers and themes that guide our mission, our vision of who we are outlined on the slides. We are here to serve the whole of Aotearoa, and our priority groups are Māori, Women, and Pasifika. And one of the things that sets us apart, I believe, is our emphasis and focus on systems change, thus ensuring sustainable transformation. So we talk about our work in the transformative sense and sustainable sense within our sector. So again, welcome each and every one of you. It's wonderful to have you here. And I will now, without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Nina to take us on this wonderful kaupapa and journey. Nina, over to you.
Thanks, Makapatama. Kia ora, ko Nina Hiriman toku ingoa. My family come from the Waikato, and I currently live in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. Those of you who are in Auckland at the moment will be aware there's a bit of a thunderstorm going on outside. So I was hit by lightning a couple of years ago, so I'm a little bit scared of thunderstorms. So if you see me looking a little bit scared and there's thunder outside, that's why. But hopefully it'll all be fine. At the moment, it's just raining. Okay, so I'm one of the portfolio managers at ConCOVE. I've spent much of my career working in data and analytics, so that's why I'm the lead on the Workforce Journey Indicators projects. I'm talking about the project as a data explorer rather than a dashboard. When we think about dashboards, we want to be able to look at those dashboards. We want to be able to know what decisions we need to make, what actions to take. Because the Workforce Journey Indicators is a collection of indicators, and there are 45 indicators there, it's more about presenting the information as a way for you to explore the indicators and see how they might relate to each other. Now, before I talk more about how we went about constructing the indicators and give you a look at the dashboard itself, I'm just going to show you first off a screenshot from the dashboard. Now, I'm not sure how big your screens are and how your eyes are, but mine have been having trouble seeing things lately, so I've done a little zoom in. So this indicator is the number of people who left the workforce and then have come back. And we can see that there are about 12,000 of them. That was about 14% of those who left. And we can see that Pākehā men are far more likely than some of our other demographic groups to come back into the workforce. Now, you might look at that and think, okay, that's interesting. but I've got a whole bunch of other questions. For example, you might want to know, what was the demographic makeup of those people who left? What does the workforce look like as a whole? Who comes in? What do we know about those who come in and those who leave? So there's a whole lot of other contextual pieces of information that we want to be able to see in order to understand this particular data better. The genesis of the workforce journey indicators came from. So there are 45 indicators across 7 different industry entry points. Now I'm just going to go back to our first screenshot there, so we can see what those entry points are. So it's tertiary graduates, school leavers, industry changes, migrants, returning New Zealanders, those coming off job seeker support, and other. Now, this is the entry point from when the person first entered the industry. They may have gone on to do tertiary study later, but when they first entered the industry, they were coming from school leavers. That's where we would see them. Oops, too far. There are 9 industry subsectors, so that's based on the ANZIC codes, the statistical categorization of various industries. When we looked at those sectors and when we got advice from Scarlatti, who did this work for us, the top level was too high and didn't give us any level of detail at all, but the next level down was too detailed and we couldn't get the various ways of slicing and dicing that data that they wanted. So they recommended that we use the same process as Wahanga Oro was using for their WIP data set in terms of grouping those. So we've used the same groupings of those, and that was a common theme throughout building the dashboard, as we wanted to be able to compare it to other sets of data. So wherever possible, when there were definitions that we needed, those were aligned with what's happening in Wahanga Oro's dashboard. And then there are 11 combinations of detailed variables. Now let's see if I can remember all 11. So there's ethnicity and age, ethnicity and employment status, ethnicity and highest qualification, ethnicity and region, ethnicity and gender, and ethnicity and socioeconomic status, and then region by all of those as well. So quite a lot of data. If we think about those 45 indicators across 7 industry entry points, 9 subsectors, and 11 combinations of detailed variables, we're getting to tens of thousands of data points in that data. Now, before we started the work, we had a framework in place in terms of what we wanted, and Scarlatti very kindly visualised that for us, and this is what we can see here. So we can see who our potential labour force is, those who are coming into the workforce, those who are engaged in the workforce, those who unfortunately leave, what's happening while they left, who comes back into the workforce, and we saw that indicator earlier, and those who are able to retire. They're not evenly spread across those pools. There's a lot in the engaged in the workforce, and there's only one indicator in the disengaged there. So there isn't across all of the indicators. Where does the data come from? So much of the data comes from the Stats New Zealand integrated data infrastructure. So some of you will know what that is. For others of you, that will just be a whole lot of words that make little sense whatsoever. So this is the official data sets which government ministries have. So there's your tax data, there's your data about your educational engagement in education, there's data about health, about justice, and a whole lot of other sets of data. The data is at an individual level so that you can link my tax income to my education to my health indicators, but that's de-identified. And the way that the data is allowed to be taken out of that is only when individuals cannot be identified from that data. It's worth pointing out here the IDI disclaimer here, which is the fine print down the bottom. These are not official statistics. These are created for research purposes. Now, there were a lot of gaps in terms of the information that we wanted. So what we asked Scarlatti to do is, can you go and have a look and see what other data is out there in terms of what might help us fill those gaps? So there are a number of other data sets from places other than the IDI. Those aren't available at the level of detail that we have for the IDI data, so I don't use them as much. They are really useful though for when we're thinking about if we're going to do further work on the dashboard, what might those other indicators might be, how might we construct them. So again, that we're not reinventing the wheel and that they're comparable across multiple data sets. Okay, so we're going to go and have a look at the dashboard, but before we do that, I've got a bit of a warning. It's not perfect. Nothing ever is, but it's not perfect. There's a number of data sets, data pieces of information that's missing. So for example, we've got no information about disabled people in the data. There are about a quarter of the population is disabled, so that's a big gap in terms of our population. But it can often be really hard to get information to be able to identify who in our population identifies as a disabled person. A lot of the times, particularly education data, and when people are applying for jobs, people don't want to declare that ahead of time because they're worried that it might prejudice the decisions about whether they're into the program. So it's a really big gap, but it's not something that we've currently got. The second gap is around leadership. We had quite a lot of discussions around a leadership indicator and how we might construct that from the data. And what we eventually agreed is that it would be quite a complicated process for an indicator that still wasn't really valuable. So there's no information there about leadership. There is an indicator around income and those who are the top income in the sector. That's a very poor proxy for leadership, but it does provide some indication about that. The third gap is labour hire. The way that the industry codes are collated, labour hire is off somewhere else that's not under construction and infrastructure. I'm just going to pause and have a glass of water, a sip of water for a moment. So in terms of gaps, those are the three gaps in terms of particular data sets that I wanted to mention. The other thing is, as soon as you create a dashboard and you've got it up there, suddenly you want different views or slices of the data that you had originally put up. So some of those things in terms of being able to compare across industries isn't as easy to do as I might like, and we may do some work on that later to make that information more accessible. Okay, so we know it's not perfect. We're going in with our expectations managed, so let's just go and have a look at the dashboard. Okay, so that takes you to the dashboard here. If you're on our website, it's down here, or if you can't find it, there is in the search box, just type workforce journeys and it will come up there. Thing to do there. Okay, so if we scroll down here, we have the dashboard here. There is a nice little button down the bottom which says open in full screen mode, which makes it a lot easier to interact with. So I recommend that you do that if you're going to use it. And here we have that same picture that I talked about earlier. On our bottom left, we've got a link to the information about the dashboard. There is a number of things there, definitions of some of the data points, a full list of what the indicators are, and some other additional information there if you're interested in seeing that. In order to get to the data itself, as we're used to on menus now, these three lines up here are the ones that tell us where we need to go. We're currently on the overview page. I'm just going to go to the indicator deep dive. Now that's the one that I showed the screenshot of earlier. And here we can see we have our various industry groups that we can select. So civil infrastructure, construction and infrastructure services, electrical, electronic, electrotechnology and telecommunications, finishing trade, off-site construction, on-site construction and masonry, plumbing, drain laying and gas fitting, retail and wholesale, and utilities. Now, if you are interested in the particular ANZIC codes which match up those groups, please let me know and I can send that out afterwards. There's 5 years data, so from 2018 to 2022. There are a small number of indicators where we don't have data for 2022, so the default is always set to 2021 when you open it, but there is the data for 2022 there. And then there's the various breakdowns that I talked about, so you can come in here and change those if you wish and see a different view on the data. Now you remember that picture from the beginning, and that's where we are up in this top corner here. It shows that we're engaged in the workforce, so it can be a little reminder of where we are. And there we can see we can choose which of those areas that we want to choose there. Now, a number of those indicators have sub areas, particularly engaged in the workforce, so we can also go and choose what we want there. And then also we can choose particular indicators. For example, if we looked at workforce size, we can see the number of people in the workforce. There is about 400,000 people. Back to, where was I, ethnicity and gender. Workforce there. We've got our industry entry points and the various breakdowns. Then when we look, for example, at some of our regional information, it can be quite difficult to read and scroll down. So you can just right click on it and go show as a table, and that gives you a much better view of the report. And then you can either go back to the report and go where you were. Now, if at any time you get lost, you can just go and refresh your web page and come back to it and start again, which is always a good thing to be able to do. So that's the individual indicators and the way that we can explore what's happening with those information. We have a second indicator deep dive page. Most of our indicators are about counting people, and they're all on this page. There are a few indicators which are means and medians. And as you know, those aggregate in different ways than simply numbers. And in order to avoid having to do dashboard acrobatics, we simply presented those on two pages, separate pages. So that's exactly the same information. It's just for those small number of indicators which are means and medians. The final one is the indicator comparison. Now, before I talk you through that, I'm going to just go back to the presentation that we were on. And talk about children's books for a short moment. When I was a child, I had one of those books where I could change various parts of the page, and I could mix and match various parts of an animal. So I could change it to an elephant's head and a lion's body and a giraffe's tail if I wanted, and then mix and match all of those. So that's how I described what I wanted when I was talking to Scaletti around how to do the indicator comparison. And I think they did a pretty good job. So if we come and have a look at our indicator comparison page, we can see here that we've got our three sets of data here, where you can select whichever indicator you wish and do that comparison. So on our left, we've got the industry groups again, so we can select those if we wish. We've got our years here. I'm going to make it to 2022. We've got our various breakdowns which we can select, same as the previous page. What's new here is that we can select, drill down on the detail of here. So, for example, we could go in and see in terms of what that looks like for Maori if we wished, and Maori woman if we wished as well. We've got that ability to do that. So these indicators on our left here are the ones that apply to everything else that's happening on the dashboard. We've also got a set of indicators for each of these comparisons. You can control which of those indicators we're showing. So let's start with a simple one of what our workforce size looks like. So we can see 2022, we've got about 400,000 people. We then go also into our working, and we have a look at, for example, those who are in the top 20%, oh, that's the wrong one, the top 20% of income earners in New Zealand. Now I'm going to take a little moment to explain that indicator. So the first one is it's based on median monthly income. Now, as most of you know, when we're looking at gender pay gaps, we look at hourly rate, and there's some really good reasons for doing it on hourly rate. However, what can impact us in terms of income is how much we've got in our pockets at the end of the day, in terms of our outcomes, in terms of what we can provide for our family, what our retirement income look like. So that's why we chose the median monthly income there. I think a second reason, it was much easier to get from the data set than hourly rate. So median monthly income. Now, again, we took that into percentiles. So when we're looking at 80%, the 80th percentile of the wider workforce income, what that means is how much of the construction and infrastructure workforce is in the top earners of the country. And we can see here that it's about a quarter of them. So essentially this is saying that construction and infrastructure is punching above its weight in terms of high incomes for the country. It's a good thing. And then our final indicator, let's go and have a look some other things that we might want to know about them. So engaged in the workforce, again, let's look at those who are qualifying and those who are undertaking training while working. And what we can see there is about 8 or 9% of the sector are currently taking formal training. So some top level numbers there. We can also then see the breakdown by our entry points and see if there are any differences there. At the moment, it's set on the numbers, so we can see that. What I find quite useful is to come in here and to change them all to percentages, because it's much easier to compare percentages than it is to look at the numbers. And what we can see here, as one might expect, is that school leavers are far more likely to be engaged in formal training while working than any of our other groups in comparison to what they look like in the workforce. We can also see that they're far less likely to be in our top indicators, top income earners, which is, again, what we might expect. So there's no surprises there. Again, as I talked about, we can come in here and we can look at what that looks like for a particular demographic group. So, for example, if we come in here and look Māori, we can have a look at those numbers and see what's going on there. I am going to come back to this data later and talk a little bit more about it, but for now I'm going to move on to a second example, because I think it's useful to see us work through several different things and see somebody actually using it and the mistakes that they might make as they're travelling around it. So I'm going to start off with those coming into work. I'm going to select that area there, and then we're going to go down to our sub area, and you can see it's still got the previous selection, so we need to change that for transition into work, and there is only one option there, so that's the only one we can select. And here we have our various indicators that we might select here. So I'm going to select the first one, which will just give us the basic numbers. Still selected on Māori, so I need to come in here and change that back to the full population. The other thing I'm going to need to do, because I'm going to look at those leaving the workforce, is go back to the 2021 as our comparison year, because it's one of the indicators where we don't have that data. So this is those who are coming in. That's about a quarter of our workforce, a bit less than. We then go and look at those going out of the workforce. The transition out of the workforce, again, there's only one option here. In terms of our measures, we've got a number, but we're going to start off with just the number of workforce leavers. And we can see here that the number of people coming in is about the same as the number of those leaving, which isn't great from a growth perspective, but that's what the numbers say. We can then go in and perhaps ask some questions about those transitioning out of the workforce. What else do we know about them? So we've got a couple of indicators about how long they've been in the workforce before they leave. So we've got one that's 5 years or more and one that is under 2 years. So let's go and have a look at that. And we can see that actually there's quite a lot of people who leave within 2 years. Again, I'm going to come back to this data later and talk a little bit more about it, but that's an overall look at the dashboard. Again, when we come back to questions, we can come back to here if we wish. Our presentation of our lovely monster there, and talk about what are some of the things that the workforce journey is used for. The first thing, as you can see, it's available on our website. Anybody can use it. So industry, vet providers, policymakers can go and look at the information. Because there's 5 years data, we can potentially look at them as impact measures and looking and seeing what's happening over time. You can see, particularly around COVID, some of the measures, some of the changes that happened there, which can be quite interesting. The other thing is internally, we use it for our project business cases. If we're looking at doing research in a particular area, we first want to go and see if we've got data that tells us anything about that. The final thing is around storytelling. That is not children's books, although you'd be forgiven for thinking that with my mix and match book earlier. That's about data storytelling. I want to spend a bit of time on that. I'm going to have another drink of water. Okay, so these are those numbers that I put up earlier, and we can see on the top row it's the total population, and on the second row we've got the totals for Māori. So what we can see is that 17% of the construction and infrastructure workforce is Māori. That's about the same as the total population, although I think the census figures are out any day now, and that may change, so it'll be interesting to see what they say, but about representative of our population, which is pretty good. However, when we look at our second indicator we've got there in terms of those people earning the most, we can see that Māori are quite underrepresented in that group. And often when we're talking about this, we can come up with lots of reasons. So that's why I've chosen one of the potential reasons here. And what we can see is that while in the total population, there's about 8 or 9% who are undertaking formal training while working, it's 13%. So it's a much higher rate of people who are engaged in formal training while working. There's another set of research by Gail Pacheco looking at gender and ethnicity pay gaps, and that's worth going and looking at if you're interested in this particular topic. And what it looks like is that most of the differences are not explained by all the things that we traditionally think we are, and that's very much reflected in the data which we have here in this dashboard. So once we've got that information, we can then go and construct it into a data story. So the data story I'm going to take you to is on about the second set of numbers that I talked to you about in terms of retaining better talent. Now, this is asking a question, and I regret to tell you that it's not providing you any answers. So this is not going to tell you the secrets of how to retain better talent. It's having discussion about what that might be. So what we can see, as we saw there, that there are about 400,000 people in the workforce and about 90,000 of them leave every year. Again, as we talked about, that many of them have been in the industry for less than 2 years, and that the additional piece of information is that some of those have quite low qualifications. So it gets us thinking about what might be some of the reasons or things that we could do in order to retain talent better. If we scroll down, there's also some links to some of the research which ConCOVE is doing, which will contribute to that discussion. So some work around the civil construction training pipeline, the trilogy in terms of how training advisors and kaiako are interacting with learners, and some work on a bystander theory of change around sex harassment in the sector. The final piece of important information here is that we need your help to improve the data story and provide the context to that story, which I'm going to talk a bit more later in terms about why context is important. So you can come in here and send us your thoughts on that information. So we've got 3 of those data stories, but as I talked about in terms of so this is something that I wrote in 2018 when I worked at the National Council of Women, and it talks about the importance of context when you're using data and how important it is, particularly when you're talking about data about people. Because if you don't understand that, you can talk about people in ways that are disrespectful and potentially damaging. So it's really important that context is included in that. That's something which a lot of it is going out and talking to people, ensuring that we've got industry voice included in our research, not just an academic kind of look at things, the literature review, and also what the industry voice is saying. So you will see a lot of interviews in the work that we do. I'm going to pause and finish there and hand over to Makapatama, who can answer or facilitate any of our questions.
Papa, Nina. Yeah, can I just say, as a colleague, I feel like I'm a new participant every time I have to listen and learn new things. Such as the nature, right? The evolving nature of the relationship between data and the real life stories, as you're talking about, Nina. But I think from a systems viewpoint, so I also appreciate it because it does set, in fact, part of the context in which, as you quite rightly said, need to consider as part of our wider consideration. Right. So this is an opportunity for us now to ask any questions. As you can imagine, there's 8 people online, 80 people, and you can't see everybody. And then, so by all means, this is a conversation. Yes, we can be orderly, but, take off your, unmute yourself and ask away, right? Until it gets chaotic, I might need to bring some order. But for now, I'm quite keen for us to have a conversation. So please, the floor is open.
Kia ora, everyone. Gary here from Christchurch. Thank you, George and Nina. Yeah, look, we've got a construction management qualification that we offer down here in Christchurch at Talent International. I was just wondering if your data also includes quantity surveying, because our strands include quantity surveying. I'm not sure if that's covered under construction infrastructure. I'm just curious because I'd be keen to track data on both sides.
It's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it, but I can find out and get back to you later. I will tell you it won't have it down to that level of detail, so you'll be able to find that in particular, but I can confirm whether it's in there and what category it is later.
Cool, thank you. My second question, if I may, any connection with the BCITO in this project, and how might they kind of work with your data, or do they also hold data?
So with a ConCOVE-driven project, we do have quite a number of contacts and conversations with BCITO, but I haven't talked to them specifically around this. There is a question in the chat about the number of trade workers in construction on labour-only contracts. Will this data pick them up? Glenn, I wonder if you could just explain that in a little about people who are on contracts or people who are on casual workers.
Yeah, it's about labour-only contracts. So there's a lot of builders, stroke even apprentices that are basically self-employed. So they invoice their employer for their hours. So labour-only contracts. So in theory, their employers should be paying withholding tax on their behalf, etc., etc. Just making sure that data will pick up their contribution, I suppose.
So there are a number of filters on there around where the income comes from. We do also have information about people who are contracting indicator, and also those people who own their own business. So I might be able to answer that in more detail afterwards in terms of pointing you to particular indicators which might help answer that question.
Thank you, Nina. Have we got any other? We've got a bit of time. Otherwise, I'm happy to start rounding us up. There was something in there from Martin.
Absolutely, Martin. It is something that you need to play with and explore. There's a lot of data in there and a lot of rich kind of data, and even I, who use it all the time, I'm still just exploring it and finding out a lot of the information there. So it is a resource to help you explore that data. The data stories which we'll be constructing will hopefully help some people understand what's there and get them thinking.
It's about the whakaaro that it will trigger and the conversations it will trigger. It's really helpful. Thank you.
Sue, you've got your hand up. Hi, Sue.
Yeah.
I do. Kia ora tātou, everybody. Great presentation, Nina. Thank you, and thanks, George. I'm not sure if anyone from the Waihanga Aotearoa Strategy and Insights team is on the call. I'm not sure, so I thought I might just let you know something that Waihanga Aotearoa, our Strategy and Insights team, here's my GM Erica, have just submitted to Stats New Zealand on the sort of project they've been doing to look at the ANZIC codes, and our report does highlight some things that are working quite well and some things that are not working that well, and civil infrastructure is one of them that's been identified as problematic in the way the data is being captured. And I can send you through that report, Nina, if you'd like to have a look at it and get a sense of our feedback to Stats New Zealand. It's my understanding is it's quite a unique opportunity for industry to comment to Stats New Zealand directly about those codes, and I know that Civil Contractors New Zealand have also put in a submission. So
I think you also talked about temporary traffic management being in an odd place in the data set before as well.
Sort of a little bit invisible, you know, and given that TTM's been highlighted quite strongly in the draft land transport GPS government policy statement, I think that's what it stands for. You know, for the first time, you know, that's really become a focus for government. So I think getting some of the data that sits around those sectors is going to be really crucial for, you know, places like Waka Kotahi that will be doing, you know, leading the reporting, I think, on some of these things. So, yeah, I'll send you the report, Nina, if you're interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we should always be working to improve those data sets and categorizations. We should also be keeping in mind there's no such thing as a perfect data set. And if you've got a perfect data set, you probably spent too much money. And that, yeah, when we're looking at this data, it's always going to be slightly imperfect, but what we need to be looking at is the trends and the comparisons and thinking about what that means. See, there's been some other stuff in chat, and I don't think any of those are questions.
I was just going to say, yeah, unless that, Sue, you want to form that into a question, I gather you're informing us and just letting us know. Kapai, anybody else? Nina, I'm feeling that we've come to a natural end. And again, just to on behalf of each and every one of us who's joined today, thank you for that insightful presentation. And I love the invitation to try it out, you know, and the other invitation for us as a team here at ConCOVE, collective team, which includes our board, our advisory groups, and our team here. But I also want to acknowledge Scaletti, as Nina has already pointed out, a partner, a key partner in this particular kaupapa. So Adam, I know you're on. I saw your name in there earlier, Ehoa, no mai harimai, and thank you again for partnering and growing with us with this kaupapa. I suppose as we start to wind things up, what you've seen is one part or one project that we've been involved with, the workforce journey indicators, and how we strive to integrate. You know, we're all trying to integrate industry insights, research into vocational education, to hopefully drive a sustainable transformation, right? So, and that's the joint desire, I think, for each and every one of us in this room. So we do hope that the project that Nina have able to lead and talk us through was of value. And may I also invite you all to check out our website. Nina has already alerted to some of the projects that are currently in play or have been finished. And what you hopefully find in there is a whole projects that we have determined going to make the greatest impact, as you've seen with our key drivers and our theme and our continued desire to serve our priority groups. Those are the projects that have been chosen right throughout the pipeline to enable us to be transformative, certainly to reimagine what it could look like if we were to partner and bring research that's, you know, workable. As Nina sort of said, it's not whilst part of it, this isn't just an academic exercise. It's supposed to be information and research that that you can apply. So that's a real strong part of our ConCOVE. Also, Nina, I hope you don't mind, if you need more information in particular to this ConCOVE, Nina's always available, and so is the rest of the team. So please reach out to us. We're certainly happy to hear from you. As Nina said, there's a continued growth for us to keep the story going, or make sure the data's current and relevant. And that can only be done by each and every one of us co-opting ourselves into this ConCOVE and supporting us along the way. And I think that's pretty much it. Thank you again, and we hope to see you at our next event. And in fact, for those of you who haven't yet signed up, we got our ConCOVE event coming up on the 4th of July at Waipuna Conventional Centre. It's going to be awesome, of course. So please join us. Again, we aim to bring you our projects that hopefully will enable systems change, transformative change within the vocational education and construction infrastructure. And that is all I have for the show tonight, folks. Thank you so much for your time. Ka kite, whiawhai lava.